to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm your host, Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Douglas Shantz.
And this week we're going to overanalyze Rogue One. So for the uninitiated, this prequel to the very first Star Wars movie tells the thrilling story of how a ragtag band of freedom fighters, including a former soldier turned prisoner, played by Felicity Jones, a Rebel Alliance insider, played by Diego Luna, a Jedi, played by Donnie Yen, and a sentient robot voiced by the amazing Alan Tudyk, work together to steal the Death Star's secret blueprint. So that's the plot. Doug, this was your pick and my opportunity to publicly rant about Star Wars.
Good. Bring it.
So question one, did you stay awake?
So for the first part of it, I sat there and go, why do I care? We all know what happens. Like, what is the point of this? I don't care. No, there wasn't a scroll. Like, you don't get the epic beginning that sends the shivers up your back whenever Force Awakens first came out, and you're like, oh, that's it. And so you're sitting there for the majority of the movie going, I don't care.
Yeah, I was so bored.
Yeah.
Like, I would have left if I didn't have to do this podcast.
But but the last 20 minutes, it paid off. And I think the only reason it paid off for me is the fact is that first of all, it explained loopholes that were prevalent in the first 3, 4 through 6, as I like to call them.
I refuse. This is like the Starbucks thing. Like, I will call it a small, medium, and large. Yeah. I don't care what Starbucks wants me to call it.
Yes, exactly.
I don't understand the stupid Star Wars numbering. The one that came out first is the first one to me.
Yes. Now, I will be an apologist for this movie. You had the dark tone that has been missing in most Star Wars movies except for Empire, which was basically, I think was named Irvin, I can't remember the director's name, but he did Empire, and if you remember Empire, which was the second one, was the best. It was dark, and I think you got the same tones in this Star Wars, which I enjoyed. But it was also that dark tone and like the slow moving pace is what makes me hate it also.
I mean, I thought this movie had some... It's just like the problems in this movie are legion to me. From a technical perspective, there are lots of really boring shots of machinery. I don't... Like, a landscape with a piece of machinery is repeatedly shown, and I don't know why. And the dialogue was execrable. Really, someone said "come my child" at some point, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is just painful."
And I think what the biggest egregious, like the worst about the dialogue was everything that Forrest Whitaker said. How he was an awful character. Again, he was within that part of like, why do I care? Then you see him he sacrificed himself on a planet that's blowing up for what reason? And you're just kind of thinking like, again, why do I care? Why, who is this character? He's been in 3 scenes. We know that he picked her up after her father got taken away by the Empire. There's just no, again, I think the crawl would have helped some of this. There's no backstory to why, the only Felicity Jones character is the only one you a little bit care about.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that Smurfette problem in a minute.
Yeah.
So if you compare, the only part of this movie I liked was that last fight with Darth Vader, which was incredibly fun and very menacing and had a great, tracking shot as he's just, working his way through people. And the rest of the fight scenes and most of the big explosions, the camera is really static. And it's just, it just sits there and it lets the action unfold. And it's just it's boring action camera work to me. I didn't think the action scenes were filmed particularly well.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you. I did some, so I had bookmarked a bunch of stuff that I wanted to read until I saw it. I went back and read it. The whole battle scene, if someone took the trailer, was completely altered. And if you remember, this was opened back up for the rumor is for reshoots to put more they had to have reshot, like, while she was on top of the scaffolding, she apparently takes down a TIE fighter, like, while she's up there, and, like...
Oh, she runs across a collapsing bridge, too.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So like, the most cliched... I mean, seriously, like, it was terrible.
And and then it shows in the trailer her carrying that hard drive, the storage unit, whatever, across on the beach running. So there was a little bit of more of an epic handoff whenever it came to that. So it's like, I tend to think that there are better action sequences, but this fell into the old trap of, we're going to do reshoots.
So I agree with, I mean, it's hard to know what was fixed in the reshoots. I know people have pointed out from the coverage I've seen that, like, a lot of backstory was edited out that was in the trailers. Yeah. I mean, it was, like, so boring. Like, I just was so... Because you didn't care about any of the characters. The outcome was predetermined, as you pointed out, which is what I found really boring about the Jar Jar Binks one.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm like, he's going to go to the dark side. I already know this. Like, you can't... It's really hard to create suspense when the outcome is predetermined. Everybody was so flat, except for, of course, the great Alan Tudyk. Who, can I just say two things? One, stop killing Alan Tudyk. Just stop. Like, the last 4 movies I've seen, Alan Tudyk has died prematurely. And I'm really getting frustrated that there should be a rule you're not allowed to kill Alan Tudyk.
Yes, please. So Alan Tudyk, best part of the movie,
far and away.
Hands down. He, like, even in, like mundane roles like his and, like, Wreck-It Ralph and everything, he brings life to characters.
He's just amazing, and I love him.
Yeah.
And second of all, come on, Joss Whedon is in the Disney universe. I just waited the whole movie for some sort of pilot joke of, like, I'm a leaf on the wind. Like, come on, throw the Firefly fans a bone here. And it didn't happen, and I was really disappointed.
Yeah, but his character, K2SO, I compare his death, like, as far as impact to a story, to, like, the one comparison I made to was, like, Dobby and Harry Potter. Because it was this like, lightful character that kind of brought... Because the movie that Dobby died in was a very dark movie, and whenever Dobby shows up, it brings lighthearted. I feel like K2SO brought enough lightheartedness to this rather mundane, dark movie that made the movie a lot more bearable. Yeah,
he was the only... good thing about the movie to me. I mean, I'm sick of the daddy issues. Like, really, again, with daddy issues. Like, it's so tired. Mm-hmm. And okay. So I hated the CGI. Is it Peter Cushing?
Yeah.
I thought that was terrible. Like, it was extremely distracting. I mean, loyal podcast listeners know I hate CGI. But I didn't think it came off at all.
No. And I feel like they overused it. I feel like they could have done one scene where you have the CGI'd character and it would have been fine. Because you have to understand that Orson's, like, only motivation was fighting against the corporate structure of the Empire. He wanted respect by climbing the corporate ladder. So they consistently hung, the corporate, the climbing it in front of him, like, you need to be doing this better, and then you'll get much more respect. And it's just like, he seemed like a little baby at one point, walking around with his cape, like...
He was not at all a good villain. He was not an remotely interesting villain, and that, I think, is one of the biggest weak points of how boring the movie was. Like, seeing him defeated meant nothing to me. Like, I didn't care.
He's a guy that works in a little cubicle and sees the guy with the glass office, and just is like, I need to get there. I'm doing good work. I deserve to get there. Look at this project I'm working on. And then whenever he doesn't get there, it's like, okay? Like,
I mean, this could easily have been, like, a Department of Defense functionary. Like, but I built the F-35, but it's gone horribly.
Yeah, it's like, oh.
But it's way over budget, and it doesn't work that well.
No. Is that his, like, I don't... It just seemed like the whole plot, it was fractured at some point, because it was all about getting the plans back to the Death Star. It was all about...
that was some terrible technobabble as well.
Yes.
Like, that was hideously incomprehensible why you needed to break the shield because the signal was... And I was like, really? Just, like... just don't even try. This is horrible. This makes no sense.
Now, I have a question. What was your first thought of Darth Vader whenever you first saw him?
Like when I was a little kid, or?
No, during this movie. The reveal of Darth Vader in this movie, what was your opinion?
I didn't like it. Did you?
He looked like he had a Halloween costume on.
Yeah.
It was like, I understand they're trying to recreate the magic from 77 or whatever.
That was a lot scarier, but also I was like a really little kid, so I don't know.
His costume looked like I could buy it at whatever Halloween store. I mean, James Earl Jones on his A game. I thought like he did a very good job. The voiceover, that was really good. As far as the costume goes, or outfit, whatever, not good.
I mean, almost none of it came off for me. The street scenes of all the like weird alien people, the costumes really just look like every other Star Wars. It lacked a level of creativity for me in terms of the creature design, the costume design, the sets. It just seemed like more of the same and not in a good way to me. But again, I'm not notably a fan of the franchise, so
yeah. And now here I will as a fan of the franchise setting, so Darth Vader, they have him living on Mustafar, which is the place where Obi-Wan took him down in episode 3 to turn him to basically kill Anakin and become Darth Vader. I thought that was like a nice little tidbit for like hardcore like Star Wars fans. I loved that part. That was awesome. It definitely gives a lot of like, kind of like for the hardcore fans that this is not their first movie, that understand the whole story. It gives them something to bite hold to. And there's a lot of that in there. There's a lot of callbacks and everything, which is one of the downfalls of the movie because it's not for everyone. This is, I think, for the more hardcore fans. They understand that the crystals that they're gathering to make the ultimate weapon on the Death Star, it's the same crystals you use to make lightsabers. And again, you have to be almost like a student of Star Wars to understand that. There's to understand how the Force works, you understand that
the Force does not work. Don't get me started on the Force. The Force is hokum. I hate the Force. That's part of why I hate Star Wars. It's so stupid.
Yeah, but it's not. Right now, you kind of see that because whenever Han Solo talks about the Force and everyone else, it's a big like. It's just like as you said, everyone in the universe has that same feeling, except for some of the hardcore followers, and you kind of see that. But that guy's not really using the Force. Like that guy doesn't really have an understanding of the Force the way that Darth Vader does, the way as a Jedi Knight would.
I'm sorry. So I watched The Force Awakens before this came out. So to backtrack on many of the quibbles, but the Force is the number one thing I dislike about Star Wars because it basically turns it into fantasy. Yes. It's not really a science fiction story, and I like science fiction better. But the issue with the Force I have is like, the Force is this wonderful thing that connects you to every other being. Like, the Force is so strong, and he can't feel his own father on the ship. Yeah. That doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a very convenient, it works sometimes and doesn't work other times type of thing. Very sort of Deus Ex Machina, and it's like, okay, no, we're going to solve this because we have the Force.
Yeah. It definitely is a Band-Aid. Here's my whole thing, and this is coming from a hardcore Star Wars apologist. George Lucas is only good because he had a general idea of a universe, and people have made it better. George Lucas is like one of the, I would say, worst like multi-millionaire like dreamed about directors. Like at least Steven Spielberg does good stuff.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. George Lucas is a hack. He is the biggest hack.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the early drawings, the early writings of Star Wars, he was Luke Skywalker. He drew himself as Luke Skywalker if you looked at some of the original concept. And now, hopefully, and I mean, The Force Awakens shows like a positive sign of that. Disney is kind of cleaning up a little bit of the mess, and I think that's the whole reason for Rogue One. I think the whole reason for Rogue One is just trying to clean up his mess for this unbearable reason to make this ultimate weapon that has a hole in the side of it that you shoot and it blows up.
Yeah, I actually did like, and you know, as we get to the more political aspects of the movie, we'll talk more about what it means to be a collaborator and fascism and all that stuff. But I did like that I I liked the idea of the story that what they were fixing was this plot hole that the Death Star was so easily destroyed, and they make it because, a rebellious element within the construction is what led to that very obvious design flaw. I thought it was a cool starting point for the story, but then, good Lord, they did nothing with it. I hate it all. I mean, the people were so flat and uninteresting. And I'm just I'll call it out right now, holy crud, Smurfette. Literally, you had one woman. There were, a couple female fighters. There was not a single woman in the entire Empire in this movie. No one. And I've never seen anybody in, an authority position, really, in the Empire.
Yeah.
And so that's just, a hideous boys club. And kudos to the diversity of the cast in terms of putting more people of color in this universe, but the absolute lack of women was just unconscionable in this state. In 2016, not a single woman could have joined her mission. It was horrible.
Yeah. And I think I don't understand that, because that is one of the downfalls of the Star Wars universe, is one of the things it also likes to push out there, is the fact that Princess Leia never talks to another woman about
Bechdel test.
Yes. Never talks about anything at all that has to do with the plot to another female.
Yeah.
It's so while you do put Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, we'll get into that, up into a leadership role where she's very strong. I mean, she's the queen rebel. She puts the boys in their place and everything. It still is missing that kind of it's just one. It's the same thing that Rogue One does. It's just one.
Yeah. And it's, there's a great concept called moral licensing. We put the lead as a female, so now we don't have to have any other women in this movie. And you're that's not how it works, guys. And yeah, I mean, I think there are science fiction stories that appeal generally equally to both sexes, and there are science fiction stories that are just boys' club. And Star Wars to me has always been a boys' club, where Star Trek, Firefly had equally a 50-50 audience in terms of females and male viewership, and there's reasons for that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. The way Disney has handled this and not having, a female lead in any Marvel movie, it's getting old.
Mm-hmm. The other question I have, what did you think about not having an open crawl? Because you obviously probably knew that it was in between 3 and 4, the movie, it was in between the first Star Wars movie and then the last one before Force Awakens. But general moviegoers I don't think would ever figure that out. I took my dad to go with me to go see it, and he's a Star Wars fan, but he's not like I am well versed on it. And he goes, "When does this even take place?" He asked me after the movie, and I'm like, "Wouldn't have Open Across explained that?"
I mean, I cannot speak to that because I absolutely knew what I was getting into before I went. But again, I'm not looking for certain buttons to be pushed. The button I wanted pushed was my Serenity button. I was like, come on, make a Serenity joke. So I'm probably not the person to ask about that. But I'm shocked by the good reviews. I've seen some negative things where people were like, this thing was a mess. Mm-hmm. But most of the reviews were generally tepidly positive. And I'm like, I'm the only one who wanted to fall asleep? That can't be right.
I think, like you said, the last 20 minutes while being just general action sequence, explosions and shooting and just general mumbo jumbo that they put out in all action movies. But the last, I'll go even with the last 5 minutes with Darth Vader and then the big reveal at the end. I think that for most moviegoers, and especially the nerd ones like me, that was well worth it being a garbage movie the first hour and a half for me.
Fair enough. I don't tend to like large action sequences like that. I tend to like hand-to-hand combat scenes a little bit better. So, also, what is the point of Stormtrooper, sorry. Yeah, Stormtrooper. I get all my villain people confused up here. What is the point of their outfits? Because they defend against absolutely nothing. They might as well be out there naked since any blast or hit over the head. I'm like, why are you all wearing helmets when they function so poorly?
I whenever the rebels go into fight on the ground. It's 5 first 150 stormtroopers, and somehow, like, the five can take out 150 of them. I'm like, just shoot. Like, how do you miss? Like,
yeah, there was a really egregious bad guys can't shoot, which I thought was particularly problematic from The Force Awakens, where you're like, they've been trained as soldiers their whole life. I'm like, you think they'd be better shots? Yeah. Like, so like that, yeah, that was, I mean, you can kind of forgive it in a lot of action movies. It was particularly noticeable here that every time Diego Luna fired, he hit somebody.
Yeah.
And like no other person could shoot that well. Like,
why does a poor guard that like is like out of work basically have this amazing gun, and no one on the rich empire that are building a planet to destroy other planets, like they don't have like the rebels' weaponry was like better, and I'm like, that should not be the case.
Right.
Yeah, like it was. I just have problems with I have problems with the whole stormtrooper thing.
Yeah, it doesn't really hang together very well. If are we through all our technical quibbles? You've got anything else in there you want to complain or praise?
I think I'm good.
Okay, so moving on to some of the moralistic and the social message of the movie, I just thought it was utterly blundered as well. Like, I didn't understand any of the moral dilemmas at the heart of this film. Like, part of me was like, okay, so if you knew that, you know, her father, so the plot element is that her father is this engineer. Oh, by the way, 0 female engineers. They line up all the engineers. They're all old white men.
I was just at dinner with 2 female engineers.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, oh, I'm so glad to know in the future that women have made literally no strides in STEM. Like, so he's an engineer and he's working on this weapon, and they capture him and they force him to keep working on it, and he makes this sort of critical flaw, and that's the whole point of the movie. And then he gets a message out about this flaw, and so then the rebellion is like, well, we need to capture him, except at this point someone's already heard the message, so they know what the flaw is, so that's fine. And then they're like, there's this whole moral dilemma over whether or not they should kill him. And I'm like, he has like intel that the Empire could get a hold of. Of course you have to kill him. Like, why is this a moral dilemma? Like, kill him. Like, I was like, he should not be spared.
No.
I don't understand what the moral message was about, like, the fringe rebellion element that Forrest Whitaker represented, which
It wasn't well explained. Like, Forrest Whitaker's character was just not well. They didn't give him a backstory. There wasn't much of an explanation of again, why do we care about him? Why should I feel emotionally impacted by him staying on the planet and dying? There was no
there's like a hint embedded in his name. I'm guessing the rest of the Spanish-speaking people who saw this movie caught that. His name is basically, as they say it in the movie, Sol Guerrero, like lone fighter, lone warrior. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So they have him be this fringe element, but I'm like, in service, like, why is he the fringe element? What is that meant to tell me? I didn't think the morality play came off. I mean, that's my criticism of Lucas, is actually that the morality play is just so starkly good versus evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to quote Rick Moranis, evil will always triumph over good because good is dumb.
Yeah.
And I think what's so disappointing for me about that is there's a great book by Ian Pierce that also deals with this very same issue about being asked, you know, the one of the characters is asked to work as someone to, I think, preserve manuscripts, if I remember correctly, in Vichy, France. And you're like, and you know, he takes the job the same way the father takes the job engineering the Death Star, to say, like, I can do more good destroying the system from the inside than I can being a rebel. And I think the movie wanted maybe to get at that point, which I think is a really good point. I think there's, you know, we're all living in a world where some of us are in fear of a fairly dictatorial style of incoming president, and we're all trying to figure again, not all of us, but some of us are trying to figure out, like, what does it mean to be in the system or not be in this system? And
well, and I think you're already seeing parts of this that do, like, you know, kind of metaphor with the movie, kind of compared to the movie, is the fact that, you know, Trump's transition team asked for the names of people that worked for DEP, and they said, no, I'm not giving you a list of staffers. And that's kind of showing, like, you can show resistance from the inside. And thank God we live in a system, that our government's in a system of checks and balances, and which there's the checks are starting to get outweighed with the supermajority.
Unless you're in North Carolina. Sorry, guys. You no longer have democracy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, jeez. That's a whole different story. But you kind of see that like we and I say we because I work in the nonprofit sector. I've worked for local government before. I consider myself a public servant, and I think that there's, like, the reason that people get into the public service is the fact that they're motivated to help serve their citizens. And I think that's a good thing, because I think the many of them, the good-hearted people that got into government the right way, and these are not elected officials, these are people that are staffers, can act as, you know, one does in Rogue One, and create, you know, these little roadblocks that make it difficult to get the agenda pushed. I mean, the way that our this is being general about it, kind of School of Rocky, but the way that our bill system works is after it passes through all the parts, then it gets distributed into the bureaucracies. It gets distributed to the DEP. It gets distributed to, you know, all of the different, like, public agencies that have people that work for them that feel the same way that a lot of Americans do, and can kind of interpret that legislation however they want to, which makes it, I mean, they call it creating legislation at implementation, you know, whenever you're implementing it. So I'm just hoping that, to get back to the movie, that there are a few people that create these little flaws that make the kind of dictatorial, you know, somewhat fascist, maybe racist, whatever do you want to put against it, policies that could possibly get passed. They're able to put a little hole in it that is able to kind of destroy it.
Well, what's so funny for me is that I'm also in the regulatory structure, and in this whole transition and what's going to happen and who's going to be working on what, because I'm actually in rulemaking for my agency. Like, my whole job was originally created to be that tool to slow everything down, right? Like, the Republicans very much started demanding more and more economic analysis of rulemaking as a way to prevent rules from getting made. So it's like, it's funny because I'm sort of like an instrument of that mindset. And as an economist, like, sure, I'm socially liberal, but I'm pro free trade. I'm an economist. Like, I drank the Kool-Aid. I've had way too much education not to think that, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats. So I'm very much in that position of having to influence rulemaking and knowing that I've sort of been put in place generally to slow it down, as opposed to what I hope to do, which is make it more effective or more sensible.
Yeah. Well, the one scene in the movie, and this is what I hope that doesn't happen, is whenever they have all of the Death Star engineers out on the platform.
Right.
And they're just like, we're going to kill them all. And, like, part of me goes to the fact that, so we'll compare them to public servants. So say they are pushing this agenda that is, you know, maybe holding some people back, maybe infringing on someone's rights, what be it. I still don't want all of them to be basically killed, like lose their job, because they are, I'm kind of the fact of, like, don't kill all these engineers because they are doing the work that we hired them to do. So, like, part of me wants to be like, we need rebellions and everything, but then part of me doesn't want to lose that institutional, like, experience that they have, because these are people that have been doing it for years under multiple presidential candidacies. And if just because of one person, do your job is basically what I'm trying to get at. Like I don't want people to, like, not do their job, because then that puts so many roadblocks in, like, the multiple goods that they're doing to stop this one maybe tiny little bad thing. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly. As someone who's a public servant and someone asks me to do something I don't 100% agree with, I'm not just going to sit in my cubicle and not do it. I might not do it as well as I could, but I also need a job. I have bills that need to be paid. I don't think we need to kill everyone off that is pushing whatever Trump's agenda, whatever transition team's agenda, but we definitely need to put roadblocks up in front of them.
I mean, I think it's really tough, and I think, again, it's an interesting moral dilemma, which the movie didn't do a good job of exploring, which is that, then you get, on the other hand, you get the, all that evil needs to triumph is for good people to stay silent, or I'm sorry I'm butchering that quote. And so it's like, okay, when is the moral choice to quit and resign and protest and say, I don't want to have this job and I don't want to pursue your agenda? And when is the moral choice to stay in your agency and do the best you can to slow things down or push things in the right direction? And I think in hindsight, it's really easy to make that call, but when you're in the situation, I agree with you. I think it's really hard.
Yeah, because I'm putting myself in his position. Whenever you see your colleagues, now their colleagues are building something that you fundamentally disagree, but he still wants to protect his colleagues. He still admits to hey, I'm the one, it's me, I've been leaking stuff to the rebels, it's me. He saves these colleagues that are doing awful things. They're designing a machine to destroy the planet, but then they could be in the same place that he is.
Right, but they probably have kids and bills to pay, and
exactly. It's tough.
It's really hard. I agree. I think it's a really tough moral dilemma, and I think it's one that most of us have been lucky in our lifetimes not to face. I remember someone telling me that they made sure that they never got any security clearances at any of their jobs so that they would never even be asked to do anything for the Department of Defense or for any of the other hazy 3-letter organizations. And I was like, that's a good policy. When do you stand on conscience? The movie gets into when do you disobey orders, and then they kind of make it when you think the girl's pretty enough. That doesn't, that's not a good moral choice.
No. And then the big line of the movie is rebellions are built on hope.
Right.
And I just don't want, there's so much negativity right now. There's so much even violent talk. There is a lot Trump Tower was evacuated today for some mysterious package, and I've heard people that I know personally say I hope someone just kills him. And I don't want it to come to that. I like the idea of rebellions are built on hope, whereas you have the hope for people that do stand up to him, that don't give him the names that he wants to look for. That's the hope that I the gushy kind of peace-loving hope. I don't want to see our government overthrown, but I also don't want to see it. I don't want it to turn into something that is warmongering, that is negatively impacting either international countries or, residents, interior.
Did you see the Indivisible guide? So a couple of congressional staffers put this guide out there, and they were which I have been saying this for months, and I was yay, somebody quote unquote heard me, right? Of course they didn't. But they were let's just do what the Tea Party did, because they did a really, really, really good job, and they didn't have a bunch of stupid protest marches. They got stuff done. And so they put together this guide that's here's how you get stuff done. You know what's effective? Going to a town hall, showing up at a publicity stunt that your member of Congress is going to be at, because the last thing they want is a whole bunch of nasty protesters when they're supposed to be doing this yay, look how I'm serving my district ribbon cutting or whatever.
Yeah. I'm telling you, one of the most annoying things for an elected official, and I'm going to talk about a federally elected official, a state elected official, and a local one, is to see a pile of mail that you have to sort through. Writing a letter. Don't send an email. Don't do it, because they're easy to delete. Guess what's hard to get rid of? A pile of paper. So you get say Trump puts out this one in the Congress or whatever, and you don't want to get it passed. Everyone has elected official, either House representative or senator, write a letter a day.
Okay, can I just stop you there? Not everyone has an elected
true. Oh, sorry, district people.
Stuff, and I'm I can't do any of this. This stinks. Go ahead.
Come down to the Council of Governments. Then the but no, just writing a letter, it makes a big difference, and that is the way to kind of make an impact, because I 100% believe this. I had a former state legislator that was my professor in college. Tell me this. There's two things that elected officials care about. The first one is making money. The second one is getting reelected so they can continue to make money.
Yes, so that's the Indivisible Guide is like the number one thing they're trying to do is get reelected. All they want is to get reelected. Here's how you make them worry about getting reelected. And so I loved it because it was good info for podcast listeners as well. From your experience, it was just so practical. It was like, no, these are the exact things that you need to do to affect change. Like, look at what other people have done, see how effective it was, and then model yourself after that.
Yeah, and I think to compare it to the movie, they take out a Star Destroyer with ants. They take out a Star Destroyer and then crash it into another one with ants. And I think that is like kind of what I'm getting at is like, so you people, so the Star Destroyers are these elected officials that seem larger than life, but all of a sudden you start pushing them a little bit and they seem to kind of get behind you. They'll get behind whatever really public opinion is.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's good to hear from your experience. Adam and I talked last time on our podcast about being the bureaucrats, like just staying out of the elected official world, the Capitol Hill world. So I don't have, admittedly, a lot of experience on that front. I'm the functionary now. I'm the one who has to keep trying to push.
My experience definitely comes from like a community like level, because my whole focus, I've worked in local governments in different like cities, cities large, cities small, and then working for I work for ICMA, which is like the basically the main association for all local government managers. And so like my perspective comes from a federalism one, whereas like the job is really getting done at a community level. All this stuff is being implemented at a community level, and those local leaders, either be elected or professional, are able to take some of these policies, some of these spendings, and use it in like very innovative and very like interesting ways. So like that is where I have the hope is at a community level, because I tend to think while we do have a lot of, as you saw from the maps, there's a lot of red communities, which if that's what you're there to serve, then you need to serve their interests serve their interests with the public in mind. You don't want to harm anyone. But the fact is that from a community level is like, I just from my experience don't think the president does that much. I hate that the voice of our country.
Agree, yeah.
He's the voice of our country, and it's definitely plays more on an international landscape than it does an internal landscape. I think we're going to be fine. Police officers, public officials, those are who they would have to get behind, is not going to round up anyone. There's not enough ICE soldiers, immigration and custom enforcement soldiers, to round up people and ship them out of the country. Like it's only going to happen in areas that are prevalent to that, and that's because of the general public. But I tend to think that overall, that these kind of policies, that the extreme examples of what his policies possibly could be, we haven't seen anything. It's not January 20th yet, but it's not going to happen just because at a community level, they're not going to stand for it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Okay, so there has been a great disturbance in the force.
No, 2016 claims another.
I know. Although, sidebar, it's funny to me how hard people were trying to come up with reasons to mourn George Michael. First, after Prince and David Bowie, it's like there's just not a lot to say. But yes, the great Carrie Fisher has left this earth.
And coming from kind of the nerd culture, I grew up in it. Always been a Star Wars fan since I was little. She is the queen. I mean, whenever you talk about like nerd culture, Carrie Fisher was the pinnacle, and I think and it helped that she embraced that role. And I mean, even in other roles outside of Star Wars, Blues Brothers is one of my favorite movies, and she plays the crazy girlfriend in that, and she's definitely one of my favorite actresses, like, of all time. I mean, she was not. I didn't realize this until like reading about it today. She was 19 whenever she filmed Star
I read that
Wars.
today too. Is that not crazy?
That is insane. And so she's been consistently. I know she did, and this is what the great part about her. She had her drug issues. I mean, filming Empire, she was addicted to cocaine and alcohol, and having the affair with Harrison Ford. All of this just came out recently in the book that she released, but. She every time, like, you would see her, hear her talk, and even whenever The Force Awakens come out, she was Princess Leia. She was that kind of that first strong female lead that like kind of put the boys in their place, and I just it's just a shame. Like it's a shame. I'd have no other words.
Yeah, she will be dearly missed. She was more than her role as Princess Leia, that's for sure. But she was a very early example of, a kind of someone who could hang with the boys. So I'm sad to see her go. I hope, again, I don't feel like her legacy is living on in Star Wars, though. I really don't. I thought Rey was a complete blank as well in The Force Awakens. She had almost no personality.
No. And hopefully they see that develop more.
Yeah, for the general, in that scene where they're plotting the next development, she didn't talk at all. All the men decided what they were going to do next, and I was again...
She's supposed to be this great strategist. I mean, they even portrayed that the original trilogy. That was her role, was a strategist for the rebellion army. That was as a bureaucrat. Just as we said, she understood the workings of the Empire and was able to figure out, plotting ways to take them down, like designing these different attacks and you don't really see that in The Force Awakens. Hopefully the next one she does have a lot of lines, but it definitely came out of nowhere. I'm hoping that it wasn't a relapse. I'm hoping that's not the case, but it's very understandable if it is, because, those kind of habits are really bad. I hate to assume the worst about people, but whenever it comes to addiction, there's a chance she was using cocaine, and that's not good on the card.
Yeah, no. Either way, like, she definitely had her demons, and she fought with them quite publicly. Yeah. I don't know if you're hearing it here first, but let's just say this now. Please, I don't want to CGI Carrie Fisher.
No. Oh, man. Movies. Yeah. Please just take...
No, there was one in this one, and it was bad, and I'm like, no CGI Carrie Fisher. Let her absolutely rest in peace. What is it? Bathed in moonlight, strangled by her own bra.
We do not need another Paul Walker.
Drowning in moonlight, strangled by her own bra.
We do not need another Paul Walker experience where you just CGI her and the whole new movie. So I'm agreeing with that. Just let her go off, write whatever kind of loophole or spin-off type of thing that you guys want to write. Just please give the fans, let her rest.
I agree. So, kind of coming to the end, I forgot to do this last time. Apologies, everybody. I would do like the idea of our impact score, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is nobody would even notice, and 10 is the world and movies as we know it is changed forever by this film. Where would you put Rogue One?
I think I'm going to lean towards the 6, and this just comes from me being a Star Wars apologist, is the fact that it does do what it set out to do, and that's clean up a major plot hole in the Star Wars original trilogy. And so as far as, again, your idea of 1 would we have never noticed, I still think whenever you talk about the original trilogy, you continue to talk about the hole in the side of the Death Star that is the main reason that the conclusion of episode 4 and 5. You know what I mean?
I agree, but 6 is a little bit high on our scale for not having... Do you think the social message got carried through? The moral dilemma of the movie that it was aiming for?
Okay, yeah. One of my notes, and I may have mentioned this earlier, was the fact that it apparently was supposed to have all this anti-Trump rhetoric, and it reshot for it. I did not see that. I don't know if you... we kind of touched on a little bit about, kind of a rebellion built within, the idea of hope, and all of, those hot button words, but I didn't see this... It was just a dark movie that told a story. I don't see the social impact being there, where... If you believe the reports, that's the reason that they had the reshoots, was to make a social impact message.
I'm skeptical about any and all reports about reshoots. So in my haterator mode, I want to give this a negative score for how few women were in it. And I just thought it was such a mess that whatever moral message they were trying to make Rebellion builds on hope.
Yeah, see, that's...
Like, I mean, we already have the Shawshank Redemption. They own hope. That hope is owned by Shawshank. So I'll give it the one. I don't think it landed. I mean, it's doing enormously well on its franchise, but...
Yeah. And it's kind of weird, and this is kind of me getting on critics a little bit, is the fact that, like, generally critics kind of, like, are harder on movies like this. And it just seems like they're giving it a pass because it's a Star Wars story.
Yeah, I've been confused by that. So, on that note, recommendations. What can you tell us to watch or listen to or read that's better?
Well, first of all, can I do my plugs here?
Go for it, please.
Okay. I do 2 different podcasts, one for my company. I think a lot of your listeners would really like it. It's called Local Gov Life. You can just find that on iTunes or wherever podcasts are found. It's about, so I produce it. I do all the interviews and everything for it and schedule all the interviews and all the editing and everything, but we actually have a radio narrator that narrates over top of it. And we tell 3 to 4 different stories around a single topic. The last one we did was the opioid epidemic, talking about addiction. And then the one that I star in is See You Next Thursday. It's actually with Nicole's cousin Maria and my friend Zachos from college. We generally just kind of sit around and talk about, like, loosely one subject, but we also give you updates on our life, and it's a funny podcast. I generally just go for the jokes on that.
So I am going to plug a couple things. In light of the Carrie Fisher passing, if you haven't seen When Harry Met Sally, then run, don't walk to whatever your ability to get a movie is. I don't know if it's streaming on Netflix, but I mean, rent it on Amazon, do something, because that movie is a classic of its genre, and the Carrie Fisher is the sort of prototypical, iconic ideal of the witty, sharp best friend in that movie. She nails that part. She has some really funny lines. I mean, for all of her of what I think made the original Star Wars work was that all of those actors had some good comic timing, and the banter in that movie and the lightheartedness and fun of the original 3, to me, has just really never been reproduced, which is part of why I haven't liked the remakes. Like, I'm like, what? You took away everything that made the first ones fun, like, and made it this dreary, serious thing, which I didn't want. And so, given that, I will also plug my personal favorite my personal favorite science fiction show, which is streaming on Netflix, was an absolute cult favorite, but many, many people may have missed. So if you are someone who really likes the more traditional sci-fi stuff, check out Farscape. Absolutely one of my favorite science fiction shows ever.
And my Carrie Fisher plug is one of my all-time favorite movies, Blues Brothers.
Yep. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. If you did, please take a second to leave a review on iTunes. I know it's a pain in the neck. You have to go to the app, you have to look for the thing and like put a review in there, but I'm begging you, please make the effort. It really helps us. You don't even have to give it a good review. I don't care at this point. Like, just leave a review. And recommend the podcast to your friends. If you want to talk to us, you can always leave a comment on the website for the episode page at www.moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Funarini or #MoviesThatMatter.
And you can get a hold of me at Doug Shawns, and please check out the See You Next Thursday Facebook page. Just go to Facebook, search See You Next Thursday, but it's facebook.com/See You Next Thursday podcast. So those are the best ways to talk to me.
Great. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.